Welcome everybody, welcome back to the city of Atsuki. Yes, I know, this has taken way too long, but bear with me if my voice still sounds a little weird. I had a bit of a rough time, didn't really feel too good. I first had a moment where I really wanted to spend more time on my music, and I was super inspired for that, and then I got some slight health issues, and due to that I really had no time or even the urge to work on videos at all. I did do some live streams on my music production channel, but I didn't really do any videos on this channel. And that was basically because I didn't feel like recording the voiceovers at all. So I felt this took way too long, and I decided to just get into it, do this voiceover. It's not going to be me talking the entire video. We're gonna have a lot of background music, and even that I'm not happy with yet, because I wanted to put in a lot more different kinds of background music and have a couple of different pieces of music that I could play in the background. But I didn't end up making any more than what I have in this video. There's the new intro music which I worked on, which I think actually turned out really nice, and I then just decided to just make a nice piano version of that for the background music of this video. So welcome back everybody. We're getting back into it. This is episode number 5, and this is the big terraforming episode. As you can see, I'm already starting working on the mountains on this map. And yeah, like I said, I'm not going to be talking over this video, the entire video, because I think most of what you're going to see is pretty self-explanatory. It's all pretty much, well, it's just terraforming, right? It's just shaping the land and making mountains, and you can I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing though. There's some techniques that I definitely figured out about making mountains in this game. The ramp tool is really powerful, so if you want to make mountains like what I'm doing right here, is create a couple of higher elevated areas, and then use the ramp tool to kind of just make these side banks and just make it all look like a realistic mountain, basically. So I really put in a lot of work in this episode. I cut out a lot of footage because otherwise it would have been way too repetitive for you guys to watch. I know some of you might have liked it to see a lot of this kind of stuff over and over again, but honestly, I didn't think it would have been that interesting of a video, so I cut out a lot. Now, as you can see, we're really adding a lot of mountains in this map. Up until now, the map was pretty much completely flat, and there was one temporary river that I removed at the start of this video, and I decided to just completely redo the map itself. While I was working on the previous episodes, there was one thing that I really stood out to me, and I was like, okay, if I'm gonna be pulling off this city and making it look as a completed or realistic looking city, I will have to put in a lot of mountains on this map, because there's no way the city is going to be the size of the entire map. I would love to, but performance wise and just the limits of the game would basically not allow me to do that. So yeah, a lot of mountain ranges, a lot of mountains and a lot of hills, and you'll see later a lot of forest as well. Now, there were a couple of things that I really struggled with this episode, and one of those was actually the forest. We'll get into that later into this video. So, I first did a completely new coastline. I already had been working a bit on the coastline in between the last episode and this one, and when I did that was also when I noticed, like, okay, the train station that we built in episode 2, I think it was, has to change. We have to make a new one. Also because it didn't really work properly. There were no people coming into the city using the Shinkansen train, and yeah, that would kind of be a bummer if that didn't work at all, because that would be the main sort of like way for people to move into the city. Obviously we'll have expressways too, we'll have highways connecting to the outside of the map, but the train, like the Japanese bullet trains, are probably one of the most easiest way to get around the country in Japan. So I really wanted to make sure that would work well. That is going to happen in one of the future episodes. I'm not entirely sure which episode yet. And yeah, for now I just wanted to make the map itself sort of like get some stuff basically going, and I think in the upcoming episode I'm doing some more Expressway stuff as well. We're kind of expanding the little town of what was it called? Sakatamachi. We're expanding that town a little bit in the future episodes, and we'll get back to the downtown area later when I made a couple of smaller train stations, and then I can basically hook those all up to the bigger downtown train station, and that way we will also be able to see if everything works properly. Before I made the train station, well, when I made the previous train station, the downtown station, there was no other stations at all. So I did test it, but when I tested it, everything worked, and then after the detailing, I found out that something didn't work anymore, and I tried a lot to get it fixed, but it just didn't work out. So eventually I just decided, let's get rid of it, let's make a new one. Plus I also think the whole train station that I built in that episode, I think it was just not realistic in terms of what we can achieve with this game. The station looked as if it was going to be a really big city. It would be a station that would be pretty similar to what you see in Tokyo. But Tokyo is a really gigantic flat plain, basically. There's a big flat area. And therefore there are train lines running everywhere in every direction. That is something we're not going to be able to do in this game, or at least not in this save game, because the way I play, how detailed I play, that's just not going to work. So I had to scratch that, and we had to start over with that. That is what we're doing in one of the future episodes, like I said. I'm not sure yet which one. So, as you can see, I'm really putting in a lot of work on the mountains first. You might see Mount Fuji pop up every now and then, but that is going to be removed later. I just placed it in there. I thought, well, maybe we can use that Mount Fuji asset, which looks kinda decent, to be honest. But the more I started looking at it with like the cinematic camera, and I started noticing like, okay, if I bring the field of view of the camera way down, that mountain doesn't really look realistic. You'll be able to see that the texture is not that high detailed, which is fine for like normal stuff. If you just want to have it on the side of your map, then it's a great asset. But if you really want to make things look realistic and you use the field of view or the cinematic camera mod with a field of view that is pretty narrow, it'll basically it'll pull everything in the background closer towards the camera. It's basically how cameras work, right? How lenses work. If you have a wide-angle lens compared to a telephoto lens, there's a huge difference in terms of the background compression. It's a little bit of a photography term. I do photography as well, so I kind of know about this stuff. And due to that compression, you're also going to blow up the textures. And if the textures are not meant to be viewed up close, which that asset, it has good textures, but it's not meant to be viewed up close. And even though it's all the way on the side of the map, all the way on the edge of the map, as soon as you start using a low field of view or a really narrow field of view, you're basically pulling that mountain that is on the edge of the map, pulling that closer towards the camera, even though the actual distance is still the same. It's part of it has to do with how camera lenses work, and the cinematic camera mod kinda works in the same way. So I decided to get rid of it again and basically just make all the mountains myself, and that meant that I did actually put in quite a bit of detail, and that even continues further on when we start doing the forest as well. So I'm just gonna let you watch me make the mountains, and I'll get back to you when we start doing something else. So here you can see I'm working on adding the textures. I'm adding some dark green texture on top of the mountains, which kind of indicates where the forests are. And this will also help as soon as I start painting in the trees. I don't have to make the trees as dense as I previously did in a first test that I did, there was one big issue that I found out is that if I wanted to cover this entire map with, or at least a good part of the map with trees, I would need probably about 1 million trees to be able to cover it and make it look dense. So I thought to myself, well, that's not really going to be good for performance, so what can I do? And I decided, well, if I find a dark green texture and paint those over the mountains, then even though the trees are not dense in every spot, it still looks like there is some sort of foliage underneath the trees because it's a darker green color than the rest of the mountains, or the rest of the map basically. So that actually turned out pretty well. Was a little bit of I had a little bit, play around a little bit with it, but it actually ended up doing pretty well. It looks pretty nice in the end. So, same thing for like this map theme texture. I decided to paint the entire seafloor with this sand texture that I chose. It's not really needed. You don't really see it that much, especially not if you're looking at it from above, but I still think like maybe at some areas we might have a little bit of more shallower water, and there you will actually see the sand texture through the water itself, so I did wanted to put in a bit of that as well. So I'm going to talk to you guys again as soon as we get into the next part, which is going to be the river. So now we're getting into the main river. Now in this episode we will only be doing one river, but there will probably be several rivers in the end when we get to one of the future episodes. This is sort of like the main river that runs through the valley that sits in between the two different sides of the map. There's mountains on either side of the map, and I wanted to have a river flowing through it, through a valley basically, which is going to give really nice options for cinematic shots there as well. And it also kind of makes, I made it snake around a little bit of a bend so that when we look at it from afar, we don't necessarily see the edge of the map. We see the mountains and then we see the river kind of snaking through it, which kind of makes it look a little bit better, especially with the cube map that I'm using as well. I don't like seeing the edge of the map. I want to, you know, make it look as if there's some mountains there, and it just sort of like blends into the sky a little bit better, blends into the background a bit better. So making this river was actually not that complicated. I just used the ramp tool again. I made sure that I had a point where I wanted I set my elevation first at an area where I wanted to go to, and then I used the leveling tool to kind of put in the river itself, and then I used the ramp tool to smoothen it out. And that really helps, because if you don't smooth out your rivers in this game, what you're gonna get is you're gonna get this really droopy, jelly water, and you're gonna have basically gaps in the water and gaps in the stream of the river, which is not what you want. Still though, even after smoothing it out, you might still get that. So what I did here, and you can see that as well, I'm adding small, really tiny water spawn markers in spots where it would create these issues. And by doing that, you're kind of just forcing the river to be fuller in certain areas. But because these water spawn marks are so small, you don't really see it when you look at the river, and when you look at the flow of the river, you don't see that there's a water spawn marker there. It just, I don't know, it just helps make everything look a little bit better. And sometimes you maybe gotta cheat a little bit, right? So yeah, there's not just water spawn markers at the edge of the map, but there are also spawn markers somewhere in the middle of the river, mostly in areas where there is a significant elevation change in the river. So where the river flows downhill, you'll see that I'll put some extra water spawn markers here and there. So then it was time for the forest, and this was a part that I really struggled with. I had a really hard time figuring out what I wanted to do for the forest, and especially which trees I wanted to use. The main issue I had previously is that whatever I would do with the forest, the trees that I would use, it would just tank my frame rate way too much, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I could do to fix that. And eventually I figured out, well, if I just find a couple of trees that have a good LOD model, and then use ULOD, so Ultimate Level of Detail mod, to make sure that the trees are mostly viewed, when you look at the map from afar, you're mostly seeing the LODs. Only when you go up close, you're seeing the high level, the high detail models of the trees. And that actually worked out really well. The main issue that was, though, I had to find some trees that looked good on the LOD model. Now I think I picked 1 or 2 Padelmo trees, and then all the other trees that I used were from the Grey Flame Pine Forest pack. Now these are absolutely amazing. I used a lot of the filler trees, and what I did is I set up a total of 5 different brushes, ranging from the bigger size trees all the way down to really small pine bushes. And I did this because if you look at the landscape, and if you look at a forest on mountains, for instance, you're not going to have the same size trees on every elevation. The bigger trees are probably going to grow on the lower parts of the mountain, and the further you go up, the smaller the trees will get. And eventually, when you get to a certain elevation level, you might even reach completely treeless areas, or you might only have small bushes here and there, or just some small shrubs. So that's why I set up a couple of different brushes as well. And I really spent a lot of time putting in the trees, way too much actually. I could have done this way quicker, but I wanted to make this realistic. And the other downside I feel like is when you just use the Forest Brush mod and just take like a big brush and just brush over the entire landscape to add all the trees, what you're gonna get is you're gonna get a lot of trees that are really densely packed together, and you probably don't need that many trees. So in certain areas it might need to be a bit denser, in certain areas you might not need as much trees as you might think. And by doing it the way that I did, by really using a small brush size and then going over the entire map and working my way up in elevation, I was able to make sure that I kept my tree count down as much as possible. I mean, however that is possible on this map, because there's a lot of trees. But I think that definitely worked out great, and especially when you get to areas where there's cliff sides, you're not going to see much trees growing on a cliffside in real life. So by being able to use a smaller brush size, I was able to make sure that I didn't paint too much over the cliff areas and really get into detail. And one thing that I also did is I used these smaller bushes and smaller shrubs around these cliff areas to kind of make it all look more realistic and to blend the bigger tree areas into, well, the cliff sides, and especially as well like around the coastline. I've used a lot of these smaller bushes as well, and it just helps to make things look more realistic. It makes it all, I guess, just more convincing, and that's definitely what I'm going for. I'm always going for getting stuff looking as realistic as I can in this game, and I think I succeeded quite well. So that's gonna be it about talking about the forest. I think I want to answer some questions though. I said in the previous episode we're gonna do a Q&A segment. I'm not sure if I'm gonna keep doing that. There weren't that many questions that came in, but let's just answer the few ones that came in, because I think, why not do it? I said I was gonna do it, so I bet I should. So the first comment that I received was from Enormous Apple Pie, and he asked, how big do you plan on making the city? Will you try to fill the map? This includes farmland, etc. Or will you keep it somewhat smaller due to possible performance issues? Well, I think I already addressed that a little bit, but yes, I do want to make the city look as a full city, and I think we're going to have a really dense, sort of like populated city center, And after that, we will get into some smaller towns along the side, which will be connected by train lines and some expressways as well. And I think when we get to the farmland area, we're actually going to be able to cover a huge amount of area without really putting in too much assets and stuff. It's mostly just going to be decals and map themed textures and some small roads here and there, but it's not going to be that dense compared to the city center. So I think we're still going to be able to get a pretty decent sized city. Next question came from Mark T. He asked, can you build a car factory in an industrial area? I sure can. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do that, but I sure can. We'll see. I'm definitely planning on doing some industrial areas. I have one really interesting idea for an industrial area, which I think could be a fun build. Keep your eye out for that in one of the future episodes. Then we had another comment from Krulza. I'm just gonna pronounce that the Dutch way. The music is very awesome. Where can I get that music that you use? The music is all made by me, so that's also why I didn't end up making more music for this episode. I already spent a lot of time on the background music for this episode, which was the new intro and outro song, and I already spent way too much time waiting with this episode and working on this episode, and I thought, let's just make a nice piano version of that is a little bit slower in tempo, and I'll just have that in the background of this episode. I'll try to make more music for the future episodes, and yeah, from now on, every time I make new music, I'll basically have extra music to put in the videos, so in the upcoming episodes we should see more variety of the music as well. Then we have this one I have to pronounce in the Dutch way. We have Die dikke kale nare man. Question: sauce over or next to your food? Well, that totally depends on the food and on the sauce. Then we had Lenny Chimmer with the question: how do you deal with creative block, both in your music and also in the game? That's a tough one. In the past months, I had a huge creative block when it came to playing this game. Also a little bit to my music, and that had to do with I just wasn't in the mindset to be creative. And I think I talked about that on my music production channel as well. Is being a creative person, sometimes you're just not in a creative rut at all. You basically don't have any inspiration, or everything that you do just doesn't turn out the way you want. And I had one of those phases. And sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. And all you can do is just do something else and wait for that inspiration to come back. Yes, you can force inspiration to come, but it's not going to be easy. And most of the time what I would do is just let's talk about it in music perspective. What I would usually do is just watch some videos about making music, buy myself a new soft synth. A soft synth is basically a synthesizer software plugin that you can load into your music production software to make sounds with. Get yourself some new tools. Watch some videos or make something completely different than what you would normally do. I feel that usually helps me get back into it. And it for sure did this time. So last question, how did you turn bushes into PO? Is there a mod? There's actually a mod available in the workshop. I forgot the name right now, but I'll put it in the video or in the description if I can find it. It's a mod that converts all your trees and vehicles into props. So what it does, it basically makes a prop version of all your trees and your vehicles. And you can then obviously use PO to convert those into a procedural object, and then you can alter the shape. So that was a really, really big help in one of the previous episodes, the one where we did the Shibuya style river. That one was really helpful because I wanted these bushes to hang over the edges. I couldn't have done it without that mod. So here you can see I'm definitely putting in a lot of effort into the coastline and adding all these trees and bushes. You can see how I'm using the smaller bushes here and there as well. And especially in these areas where there's cliff sides as well, I try to not paint over the cliffs and really sort of like blend it in, because that is how it would look in real life too. You wouldn't have bushes and trees just growing out of cliff sides. I mean, yes, every now and then that might happen, but it's not really common, right? If you have a really rocky cliff area, there might be one or two trees that made it to grow there, you know, but most wouldn't. And yeah, I think this really helped convey a better amount of realism in terms of making the forest. So yeah, I don't really have much else to talk about. I'll get back at the end of this video when there's one last section that I want to show you. But for now, yeah, I hope that you don't mind that this episode is a little bit all over the place and that the voiceover is a little bit all over the place. I'm still not fully recovered of how bad I felt, and you might hear it in my voice as well. I'm just happy I have this episode done, and I'm just happy that we can move forward with the future episodes. Again, I'm also focusing this upcoming year a lot on working on my music and a lot on working on my music production channel, which is my main channel. So don't expect a regular upload schedule for these City Skylines videos. I will do them when I feel like I have time to do one or when I have inspiration to do one. And I might even have videos in the future which have very little voiceover. If I have another one of those moments where I just don't feel like recording voiceovers, because to be honest, I like it when a video has a voiceover, but I necessarily don't really like making voiceovers and recording them. I feel it's quite of a cumbersome thing to do. It extends the video editing process quite a bit because it takes quite a bit of time to record the voiceover and think about what am I gonna say, what do I want to talk about in the video. Maybe write sort of like a very basic script of like little bulletin points that I want to talk about, and then still it's quite a big process to get to the end of making a full video with a voiceover, especially if the video gets like about 30 minutes long or 45 minutes or whatever. This video I cut out a lot because otherwise this video would probably have been about an hour long. So yeah, I hope you guys don't mind. So we are nearing the final parts of the episode now, and in this area of the episode you can really see how I'm using the smaller bushes and the smaller brushes to sort of like make the tops of the mountains look a lot more realistic. This is what I was talking about, where you wouldn't see the bigger trees growing all the way on the top of the mountain, and that probably, I'm not an expert on this, but I know that certain types of trees only grow up to certain levels of elevation. Probably something with erosion and wind might also have something to do with it. Like I said, I'm not an expert, I'm not a biologist or anything, but I just know that this made it look a lot more realistic, and I felt like doing it this way was the right way to do, even though it took way too long to do. Yeah, the end result was just so much better. So here you can see what I mean. Like, you have these cliff sides with little green grassy patches in between. On those green patches, you would see small bushes growing, but not on the cliffside itself. And I could have just taken a big brush and just brushed over the entire mountain range and just called it a day. But would that really look good? I don't think so, and I think the way I did it now turned out way better. Plus, the other plus side is this way I was able to keep the amount of trees down quite a bit, especially because I already knew I wanted to have these smaller bushes in as well. And the more of these smaller bushes I put in, the more trees we're going to be using on the map, because they only take up a very limited amount of space, right? The bigger trees take up more space, so you can fill a bigger area with less trees. And the smaller bushes, they take up a very tiny amount of space, so the more I need of those, the more trees we're going to have on the map, and the more trees we're going to have on the map, the less the performance is going to be. So I basically just waited with a lot of these very tiny bushes for like these areas around the tops of the mountains and around the coastline, around the edges of the forest, to kind of blend those all in, and I think that worked out absolutely great. So, for the final part of this episode, I wanted to at least make sure we had a new expressway connection in as well. So, I removed the train station, as I told you guys in the last episode. I was gonna get rid of the main train station, and we're gonna do a new train station at some point in the future. Now, I did wanted to make sure that we had a way for people to come into the city though, so I ended up using the Shuto Expressway assets to kind of make a temporary expressway. Maybe not even temporary, I think this will actually be roughly the layout of what the expressway will do and how it will reach the city center. But this is also going to help with what we're going to do in the next episode. Next episode is going to be some expressway stuff. It's not going to be like actually making expressways, but we're going to be doing something related to the expressway. And I think it's a really cool build for the next episode. I think you guys are going to love it. I'm not sure entirely when that episode's going to be done, but I can say one thing though. I already recorded about 5 episodes in advance now, so it's basically I just have to edit the videos and record the voiceovers, and I can put the videos out. I haven't sit still, basically. I had this moment where I felt sick and I couldn't really record the voiceovers, but I still had this urge to play the game. So I definitely played the game a lot, and I recorded all the progress that I did so far. So yeah, I have a lot of footage ready to be edited, and that means we're gonna probably have a couple of episodes done. Well, I hope in a relatively short amount of time, but I can't promise anything. So yeah, here you can see I'm working on getting the expressways in, and I'm adding some tunnels, because one thing that you see a lot in Japan, because it's such a mountainous country, there's a lot of tunnels both for the train lines but also for the expressways. And these tunnels, yeah, I just had to put a lot of them in. So certain areas I'm just completely cutting through the mountain range by using some tunnels. And I think just from looking at Google Maps, I think that is definitely realistic for the Japanese landscape. I've also seen a couple of inspiring things, some really interesting expressway interchanges in the mountains. I might do something like that in the future as well. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to pull that off, but it would be a really, really nice challenge. There's one specific interchange that I know of that is located, I think it's located on the northwestern side of Tokyo, and it's the Takao-san interchange. It's not necessarily an interchange where two highways cross each other, but it's kind of like an expressway exit, and it sits right in the valley in between two mountains, and the expressway cuts through the mountains with a tunnel, comes out of the tunnel in this valley, and then there's this really interesting expressway interchange slash exit that allows people to get from the expressway onto the main streets below, and then it goes straight back through a tunnel into the next mountain, which is really cool. It's a really narrow, limited space, and just seeing how they pulled that off and how they optimized that little bit of space there, I really want to try do something like that in this city. I'm not sure when. We have a lot of ground to cover before we can do that, so it might actually take quite a bit of time until we reach that point. So that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, even though this video might have not been that... well, it didn't turn out how I wanted it to be, but I hope you guys still enjoy. I hope you don't mind that it took that long for me to actually do this episode. I wanted to have this episode out way sooner. I wanted to have this episode out last year, but it just didn't pan out that well. And yeah, sometimes you just gotta accept that, right? So, hope you guys don't mind. Hope you guys will stick with me with the future episodes, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Peace.